welcome to this video. My name is Eva, and in this video I talk about the inner child and inner child healing work. It's a very interesting topic and also super important. Why do I talk about it? Because I'm right now on my journey to heal my inner child and create a stronger and more loving connection with myself. And why it's important in general, I think that for me, inner child healing work is just the foundation of creating long change in the way that you interact in relationship, your work environment, etc. Because I think before that, before understanding more about what trauma really is, I was thinking, okay, if I'm just more disciplined or if I just have more willpower, I can change certain patterns. But now that I am a little bit more in trauma informed, I really understand that trauma is just much stronger. And I think that if we can create healing with our inner child, we can really create long-lasting change. And that is for me the foundation to a lot of different things to creating a healthier environment for ourselves. Because what can happen, and some examples of things that happen when our inner child is not healed, it can happen, for example, that you stay in relationships that are not really helpful for you or healthy for you. It can happen that you, for example, give trauma to your children, if you have children, because you have not really worked on your inner child connection. Or it can happen that you're very easily triggered, and that can have consequences for your work environment or work relationships or personal relationships. And so what is the inner child? The inner child is a concept in psychology. I can read a short definition, and that represents the part of us that retains the feelings, memories, and experiences from our earlier years. So the aspects of ourself carries the emotions, wonder, playfulness, creativity, and vulnerability of our childhood, but also a lot of wounds or unmet needs that we might have from our childhood. So it's kind of like this part of yourself that is younger, a younger version of yourself. And for me it's like maybe a little bit abstract and unclear to understand. And for me, what really helped me was to watch a movie. It's called Uptown Girl, and it's a really beautiful representation of that inner child connection, because you have that small child, which is, I think, maybe like 10, 11, something like that, and you have a girl in her 20s or a woman in her 20s, and it really shows that this younger girl or child is the younger child or the inner child of the woman in her 20s. And it's a really beautiful movie of showing that connection between your younger version and your adult version. And now you might think, why is it so important to have that, like to know that this younger version of myself exists? It's just because it has directly influence on our adult version. So some examples. For example, if you have experienced abuse, for example, you were bullied by your parents or maybe by your brothers or sisters, or maybe or maybe by any other person that was important in your life back then, it might happen that you were stuck in that emotional age in a certain way, that you were feeling really sad, really angry, really disappointed, and that is your inner child. And now what happens, even though you're maybe in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 60s, whatever it is, you got triggered in a similar way, that maybe someone says something negative about you, you react from that inner child back then. Like as a child, maybe you were so angry, for example, at your parents, and you wanted to scream at them, but you couldn't because they maybe were quite authoritarian, so you couldn't say anything. So now as an adult, you explode, for example, because back then as a child you couldn't, but you still have that wound. So now you overcompensate in a way, and now you scream at people around you. Or maybe another example could be that someone grew up with maybe in school with bullying, or parents that were just never really available to them. So they learned as a child, okay, if I please others, so for example, if I always do what other people want me to do, if I don't make any noise or anything like that, then there's no problems for me. So it is kind of okay for me. And then what happens is that later as an adult, you still have all of those coping mechanisms, but as an adult, that can lead to, for example, burnout, because you might want to say no, you might want to set a boundary, but you think kind of, because you have that from your inner child who was never allowed to say no, or who thought, okay, if I say no, people will be angry at me. So you still keep that from your childhood, and once you're an adult, you cannot, for example, set boundaries. So that is, and that can lead to depression or burnout, or because if you never say no at work, you will always get more work, more work, more work. So eventually at one point you might just be done, you cannot do it anymore. And that's why it's so important to recognize that inner child and to do that inner child healing, because because it can really affect our adult self. Or for example, if as a child, for example, your parent died, so you had that abandonment, even though it was not abandonment, but they were not there anymore, and you have that abandonment wound as a child. And then once you become an adult, you're so scared that people will leave you, and that, for example, then if you're in a relationship and your partner's not really a good person to you, but you still have that abandonment wound from your childhood, you are so scared that the other person might leave you, so you might tolerate a lot of things from your partner even though they don't treat you so nicely. So that can also be another example, and why it's so important to do that kind of healing work. Because there's also one term which is so super interesting. It's called age regression, and it basically means that sometimes when certain trauma happens to us, we can get stuck in a certain age, but it's not really getting stuck. It's more, there's also a quote that I want to read. It doesn't necessarily make you stuck at a certain age, but instead you're acting out of the emotional wounding that happened at that age. And I see it a lot, like with myself or with other people, with adults in general. Like in certain situations, they just act out of their inner child, and that's not really good, because, for example, if you have someone who acts out from their inner child, they cannot think logically anymore, and that can cause a lot of different harm. So, for example, as I said before, someone who lashes out on other people just because they get criticized, or someone who has this fear of abandonment, and so they stay in abusive relationships even though it's not good for them. Or maybe a lot more examples, for example, fear of being seen. So you might never ask for a raise in work because you're scared that people might judge you, or whatever it is. So that is all something that can happen if you don't learn about your inner child and you don't heal your inner child. But thankfully, there are a lot of different ways how we can kind of heal this inner child. So I think, or heal that connection in a way. So I think the most important one is to get professional help. So go to a therapist or coach who specializes in that, and seek professional help, because it's just, from my experience, so much better, because they can see your blind spot. They can see things that you cannot see. So, for example, you have, like, you think, okay, my inner child is that and that and that, but another person can really see things that you cannot see. They can see your blind spot, and they can really say, no, I have a different opinion. So that is, and they can guide you, and it's so good if you have that. Another thing that you can do is to do your research and get information in general, read books about it. Another thing that you can do is to get to know your inner child. So write down, if you can do it in a therapeutic process, I mean, that's the best, but also just write down what is my inner child, and then also write down positive and negative parts. So, for example, positive parts could be that, okay, my inner child, I was very free, very happy, very excited to try a lot of different things, very careless, and just really motivated. And maybe the more sad parts could be, okay, I was really sad, I was really anxious, maybe I was sometimes really really helpless. I felt very helpless. So write down everything that you might feel you have, and that can be a great way to get to know your inner child. And another thing that you can do is to recognize when you get triggered. So for example, triggers could be that if you get criticized and it's just one small criticism, but you think about it like for 3 weeks and it just hurts you so much, whereas another person, they get criticized and they're just like, yeah, that's true, and then after one day they don't think about it anymore. So, or maybe you, like, a trigger is always, in my opinion, or from my understanding, is always when you have a reaction that is just not logical in a way. So for example, if you get criticized, the logical reaction would be, and it's a minor criticism, the logical reaction would be to think about it maybe one day, try to make it better next time, and that's kind of it. But if you think about it for a month or for weeks, that's just too much. So that could be an example of a trigger. Or maybe also another trigger could be that, for example, you get a criticism and you lash out on the other person even though it's just too much. That could also be a sign of a trigger, and a sign that there might be a certain wound that you have from your childhood. Yeah, and just becoming aware of it. I mean, if you have a therapist, that would be awesome, because they probably can see more things that you can see, but also doing it on your own. Maybe you can also check if there's a journal, like inner child healing work, that you can do. Another thing that you can do is to learn new behaviors and new coping mechanisms, and that takes some time, but it's definitely possible that, for example, in that case, you could say, okay, I will stop that rumination, that I will not think for weeks about this minor criticism, and always if that thought pops up in my mind, I will think about something else. Or if you lash out on people, you can say, okay, instead of that, I will try to breathe and do that exercise. Or maybe if there's a certain change at work and I get really, really anxious when there are certain changes, because, for example, my childhood was chaotic or uncontrollable, I might do certain, and instead of like drinking alcohol, I would go for a walk or whatever it is. So to find healthier coping mechanisms, that can be beautiful and really, really helpful. Another thing that is super, super important is to engage in self-compassion, because in the end, it's usually not your fault if you have those core emotional wounds. It could be just because of tragic events that happened, or of abuse or bullying, whatever it was. So be compassionate with yourself while you are doing this whole journey. And many times, many of the coping mechanisms that we learned as children, such as people pleasing, or certain other, or maybe workaholism, like by focusing too much on one area, we did it because we didn't know any other way on how to deal with the situation. So it was not it was just a natural consequence of our environment, and maybe in our childhood it served us well, but now as adults it doesn't serve us well anymore. So we can lovingly change our coping mechanisms, and it's something very, very beautiful to do. So yeah, be compassionate with yourself. Also, what would be great if you could embrace your inner child. That is also super beautiful to say, like, when you notice that you feel triggered, for example, your abandonment wound gets triggered because your partner is maybe going out with friends and you feel a little bit lonely, or maybe you get criticized and you feel like so hurt. You can embrace your inner child, and you can say to your inner child, okay, I feel like you're really sad, and maybe in childhood certain things happened and that made you really sad, but now I'm the adult self. So to really separate, okay, this is my inner child that feels sad, but me as an adult, the adult version of me, I can take care of my inner child. And to really make that step out of your inner child and to say, like, okay, this is my inner child, the wounds and all of that, but now I'm an adult, and if my inner child is sad or angry or whatever it is, my adult version, I can take care of my inner child and I can say it's going to be okay. And that is so, so, so great, especially in time of like chaos, for example, tragic death, whatever it is, and you're really vulnerable and your inner child is maybe really, really scared. If you're the adult version of yourself taking care of your inner child, that is fantastic, so great. So yeah, and you can use like affirmations such as I'm safe, I'm here for you, I embrace my inner child, and all of that. Another thing that you can do also to kind of create that separation between inner child and adult self is to journal. So yeah, for example, affirmations, or you think, okay, maybe, okay, that was something that triggered me, and now how do I feel from my inner child? How does my inner child self feel? And how does my adult version self would react? Like, for example, if you get criticized and you react by screaming or shouting because your inner child is so angry because maybe as a child you were never listened to, or people never or criticized you a lot. So instead of screaming and shouting, you can say, as the adult version of yourself, you can say, okay, it's okay, like, I'm here for you, and then you can choose a healthier coping mechanism. And that is so great, and that's so much better in my opinion than just having like willpower to never do certain things again, because it's just not sustainable. If you just have willpower, it's so much more important to really look behind what's really going on, and to do that healing work with your inner child, so that you don't have to fight against the urge to do something, like for example screaming or always thinking about something, but you can actually heal the root of what is really going on. And once you heal the root, the need might completely disappear or might lessen a lot. So that was super helpful. Another thing that you can do is to validate and process emotions. So for example, if you feel, okay, I feel really angry, I feel really sad, I feel really whatever it is, to really get in touch with your emotions. If you have a therapist or a coach, so helpful, but to get in touch with your emotions and learn the process of actually processing your emotions. So feeling it, breathing with it, and letting go also of it. And yeah, whole different topic, but that can be helpful. Also reparenting yourself, and that's also helpful, especially for people who've been maybe abused and by certain people in their childhood, but or even if you have been like in an abusive relationship in your early 20s or late teens, whatever it is, if you can reparent yourself, that is so helpful. So for example, if you had parents who were really mean or criticizing, and you made one small minor mistake and they just exploded, that was not good parenting, and you can recognize that, and you can say, okay, that was not okay, that was not good parenting, and now I will reparent myself, and if I do a minor or small mistake, I will be kind to myself, and I would say, yeah, it's no big deal, or things like that. So, or if you, I don't know, like, there's so many different examples, like for example, if you if your parents were maybe very like hippie like, and there was no structure at all, but you as a child, you needed that structure, that was also not the best parenting. So you can say now as an adult, okay, I needed much more structure than I had as a child, so now as an adult you can give yourself that structure by maybe having a certain job or having certain rituals that give you more structure. So things like that, to say, okay, I'm now an adult, and even though maybe some things in my childhood were maybe not the best, now I'm an adult and I can take responsibility for taking care of my inner child now, for reparenting myself. And I think that's just like, if you want to have children, that's the best thing you can do to prepare for having children, to learn to reparent yourself, learn to process you and your own emotions, and learning to build that emotional maturity. That is so great. And maybe the last one is to protect your inner child by setting boundaries. So for example, if you get yourself into certain situations that your inner child does not feel safe or good with, so for example relationships that are not healthy, or for example a job that you don't like at all, or maybe a boss that always, or certain clients that just ask for too much, that you actually set boundaries and you say, no, this is not possible, I cannot do it, I cannot make that deadline, or whatever it is, to set certain boundaries so that you can protect your inner child. Because I think for many people who have a lot of like, or some childhood wounds, if you can step into that empowering role and saying, okay, I am actually the adult now and I will actually protect my inner child, it is super super empowering. And I think that's really the step that at least I want to get to, and I am getting now to. I will always protect myself, and whatever happens, I'm always there for my inner child. Like the adult version of me is always there for my inner child. And yeah, so that was really 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 important, because I think that in our society, like in school, nobody teaches us those things. And so many people, if not most people, they run around completely being stuck in their inner child, and they see the world from their inner child perspective. And that causes a lot of harm, let it be in work or when they have children. So it's basically a child raising a child in a lot of cases. So I think it's also so important to do that inner child healing work, to understand, okay, I'm not a child anymore, um, and I'm an adult now. Like if you're an adult, actually, like from what it is, like 20 on, you're an adult more or less. So if you can make that differentiation, that is so 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 helpful, because it can really be the foundation for so much long lasting change. And it's so 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 great. So yeah, and it can make you get unstuck. Like I think often when we are like stuck in certain situations and we don't know how to get out of it, I think sometimes when we do that inner child healing work and we actually ask ourselves, what emotion am I feeling? Is this actually like something that maybe I have a wound from my childhood? And if we then be in communication with that inner child and do that healing work, we can really change the outcome of the situation and we can get unstuck. So yeah, if you can get therapy, if you feel that you're struggling with this inner child healing, it can help so much. And I wish you a lot of love for your journey. And thank you so much for watching. And if you want, you can write me an email. You can also check out, maybe I'm offering something if you watch this video in the future, if I'm offering something in the description box. And I see you very soon, probably in a new video. So thank you so much for watching. See you soon.